Welcome students to English 105. My name is Professor H and I will be your teacher for this class. Now in English 105 we're going to focus on research methods. In other words, we're going to focus on teaching you how to properly use APA, how to write an academic research paper, how to research a research paper, how to write an abstract, how to evaluate credible sources, and how to avoid fallacies and bias in your writing so that you write a good argumentation paper. We're going to go over the difference between a persuasive essay and an argumentative essay, and we're going to go over how to write a good counter-argument paragraph and a rebuttal paragraph using your textbook. I don't know if this will show. Yeah, here we go. Using your textbook, They Say, I Say. Now this textbook has a lot of templates that teaches you how to write many different ways in which you can argue your counter-argument and rebuttal paragraph. So to start off, I come from the East Coast, and then I moved out here to go to college. And I love teaching English, and I teach English 101, English 105, that is this course, and I teach English 115, which is the Introduction to Literature. So this particular lecture, I'm just going to go over what is an academic paper. So an academic paper, in short, is just a research paper where you talk about a topic, or you inform the reader of a topic, and you research. In order to become an expert in that topic, you have to research many different books, articles, and peer-reviewed articles in order to write a good paper. So basically and when we write an academic research paper, we want to write in a formal tone. And so we write in a much more formal tone than if we were speaking to our parents, our friends, or family. Now this is review for those of you who have gone through English 101. You're rolling your eyes around going, okay, Professor H, we went through this during week 3. So I'm just going to go over it, review it. Tone. So when we write an academic research paper, we want to maintain a formal tone. We want to use, as much as we can, we use third-person case. We can use first-person case, but in a limited basis, and only in the way that the book says, like in the templates. So I'll go over all of that later on. So this week, we're going to go over what are your strengths and weaknesses in writing a research paper. What difficulties have you had writing a research paper? And so we write research papers for many purposes. For instance, whenever we write a research paper, we want to either inform the reader, we want to educate the reader, or we want to persuade the reader, and sometimes even entertain the reader so that the material is not so dry. And so when we write an academic research paper, we have to find credible sources. And so in my later lecture, I'm going to go over how do we find credible sources? How do we write an abstract? And so basically, by the time you finish English 105, you will have a good grasp on how to write a good academic research paper for your major. And so, and when whatever it is that you're going to major in here at Los Angeles Pacific University, you have to know how to write a good research paper. For basically, there are two kinds of research papers. You've got the student research papers, and then you've got research papers that's written by experts. So let's say if I want to write a research paper about the best practices in teaching, then my audience would be other teachers who would then want to read up on my blog or my article on what are the best practices in teaching. If you're a psychologist, you would write the best practices in how to be a psychologist. If you're a nurse, you would write the best practices in what it is to be a nurse. So those are what I call expert research papers. In other words, research papers written by experts in the field, people who are currently practicing in the field of nursing, psychology, teaching, engineering, whatever it is that they're doing. So that's one kind of research paper. Then we've got the research papers that you'll be doing for this class. You'll be doing what's called student research papers. What's the purpose of a student research paper, you ask me? Well, in a student research paper, when you go to college for your bachelor's, you have 4 years of college usually. And the first 2 years of college is what you call foundational knowledge. In other words, you're learning the basics of whatever it is you're majoring in. So and as you learn the basics of your major, then your teacher will require you to write student papers in order to show the teacher that you've mastered the material. And so the student papers, for instance, if you're going to major in applied psychology, so then the teacher will have you write in a lot of topics that are relevant to applied psychology. When I was majoring to become a teacher, to get my teaching credential, I had to write a lot of research papers about education, bilingual education, since I became an ESL English teacher. So I remember writing a lot of the bilingual ed, and that means that I had to learn how to research the databases, the education databases found in the library. So we're also going to go over in this class how to use the APU library, how to find databases that's relevant to your major. We're also going to go over, I'm going to go over briefly how to write a science paper, because a lot of you, for your major, you're going to write a science paper. And knowing the parts of a science paper will help you understand how to read the scholarly sources found in the databases. And you're going to learn that once you know how to write a science paper, then it becomes much easier to read other people's science papers. So the first 2 years of college, you're going to be reading other people's science papers, and then you're going to write about other people's research. Then the last 2 or 3 years of college, you'll be the one writing the expert research papers that other people are going to summarize. So right now you're in the very beginning of your college career, so you're just going to be reading about other people's papers and then writing about what you learn from those papers in your paper. And so so basically when you write your academic research paper, you're reporting the facts. You're telling the reader, this is what this topic is about. And so as a result, this is why you use, for the most part, third-person case, he, she, they, because third-person case is what's called a reporter case. In other words, that's the case you use when you want to tell people what happened. So if I want to talk about Helen went to the grocery store, Helen bought a lot of groceries, and then Helen went home. So basically, that's third-person case. She. If I want to say, I went to the grocery store and I bought some groceries, that's first-person case because I'm talking about something that happened to me. And if I want to talk about something that said, oh, you should go to the grocery store, you need food, that's second-person case. And then we use second-person case when talking to other people. Hey, you over there. And in a research paper, it's rude to directly include the reader as if you're pointing, you. So this is the reason why in research papers we avoid using you and your. So this you'll remember from my English 101 class. However, you can use I in certain cases. And so in some research publications are now allowing first-person case in order to reach more readers, because the American society has in general gotten more colloquial and more casual, and so the researchers are now breaking the tradition of only using third-person case, and in some cases allowing people to talk about themselves, and I, me, our, first-person case. But in general, when we write a science paper, when we write a medical paper, when we write an academic research paper, most of the time you're going to be using third-person case, he, she, they. And because you can even write about yourself in third-person case. So if I were to say, instead of saying, I'm giving this lecture, or I would say, Professor H is giving a lecture right now on Zoom, or this author is giving a lecture on Zoom right now. So those are examples of ways. Now, why would you want to use third-person case? Why write about yourself? It seems so unnatural, right? Because whenever we talk about ourselves, we always say I and my and we. But when we use first-person case, it usually sounds too conversational. So we stick to third-person case in order to have a more professional feel to our paper and to sound like we are, because when we research other people's papers, we would tend to say, and Dr. Smith states that 85% of Americans are overweight. Then you put the date and the page number. That's an example of an in-text citation. So for the most part, when we write a research paper, we are citing other people. I'm going to get into APA in a second. So we are reporting to the reader or to the teacher what it is we found in our research about our topic, so that we can show our teacher or the reader that we know our topic, or so we either inform the reader of the topic, like climate change is real, for instance, or you want to convince the reader of your point of view. Now, in this class, we're going to do both. So when we write a paper where we just inform people of a topic, that's known as an expository essay. If we write an essay in which we want to convince someone of our point of view, that's known as a persuasive essay. If we want to convince someone of our point of view and write something about the other side and about our side, in other words, we write about both sides of an issue, that's known as an argumentative paper or argumentative essay. And so I'm going to go over the differences and the nuances between an expository essay, a persuasive essay, an argumentative essay. Now in English 101, we wrote a persuasive essay for our essay 2, where you convince the reader of your point of view. But you did not write a counter-argument paragraph and a rebuttal. If you had, that would have been an argumentative essay. So that's one step more that we're going to do in this class, where we're going to focus more on research methods, which is the name of this class. So I'm going to start the second half of this lecture about APA. And so you're going to write your essays in the APA format. And APA stands for American Psychological Association. And you can go to their official website at www.apa.org. And you can buy their official manual, APA manual, which is, I think they're in their 7th edition. And it's in this APA manual that all the other books, all the other writing books, base their APA information on. So this is the official website for all things APA. So when do we use APA? We use APA to give credit to the researcher, because the researcher would have spent years researching, say, her research problem. And I will go over what is a research paper, what is a science paper. If you go to Professor H, my writing channel, Professor H writing channel, and then you Google how to write a science paper, and then you Google, when I say Google, I mean you go to YouTube, and then from YouTube you would Google Professor H writing channel, how to write a science paper. There I give you a long explanation, or a lecture, a 1-hour lecture on what is a science paper, how a science paper is written, and then you learn the different components of a science paper. Why is this important? Because once you understand how to write how a science paper is written, then you are able to understand the scholarly sources and the peer-reviewed articles that you're going to be reading for your research. So getting back to APA. So APA stands for American Psychological Association, and we always cite anything that has numbers, any kind of numerical data, such as historical date. In 1492, Christopher Columbus discovered America. Then you're going to, right after that, you put it in quotations. Then you have date. Then you have, the author, the date, and the page number, if it's a direct quote. And then if it's a paraphrase quote, that is, you're putting some source into your own words. This I'm going to go over in a lot more detail in week 2, I think. Oh, week 3. Yeah, in week 3, I will go over in excruciating detail the difference between a direct quote, paraphrase quote, in-text citation, and reference citations, in which students confuse all of that, usually. So I'll go over that in week 3. So all you have to know in week 1 is APA gives credit to the researcher, and also you avoid plagiarism. If you just write in 1492, Christopher Columbus discovered America, and you just leave it like that, then the Turnitin, your plagiarism checker, is going to mark that as plagiarism, and you're going to get a huge plagiarism score. So you want to avoid a huge plagiarism score. When you do the Turnitin, you want the score as low as possible. You don't want 50% or 80% or high numbers. So for Turnitin, the lower the score, the better. There is no official low score for, because each teacher has their own threshold. Some teachers think that 15% is too high a plagiarism score. Other teachers think it's 10%. Other teachers think it's 5%. It seems to differ from teacher to teacher. So I'll let you use your own common sense to determine, but how much percentage-wise. Basically, you go by the color. If the color for the Turnitin, if the color comes out green, you're good to go. If it starts to look yellow or red, then that means either you have too many sources or you forgot to cite your numerical data. So I'm going to go over all of that when you cite it. Basically, one easy rule to remember is you cite anything with numbers, whether it's a percentage, whether it's a dollar sign. John makes $5 an hour. Okay, you've got to cite the number, because why? Well, where did those numbers come from? Who created those numbers? Somebody had to spend time creating those, researching those numbers so that you could put it into your paper. If you don't cite your sources, then you're just stealing someone's research. You're stealing someone's time. That's plagiarism. So that's what we're going to learn, how to properly cite APA. So any kind of numbers, any kind of unknown knowledge, we cite the source. And also, if you're in doubt, you're like thinking, should this be cited? So if in doubt, cite the source. The only time we don't cite a source is common knowledge, such as in the Western world, everybody knows that December 24th is Christmas Eve, and December 25th is Christmas Day. Now, not everybody in the rest of the world, for instance, so sometimes common knowledge can be cultural, right? So if I were to ask you on what date, or how do we know when is Chinese New Year, you would be like, huh? I don't know. But if you were to ask anybody in China, they would know. That's like the December 24th here. So that's why common knowledge can be culturally based. And so if you're in doubt what everybody knows and what everyone doesn't know, cite the source. So that's what I always say. If in doubt, cite the source, because then you give credit to the researcher. So any kind of medical data, historical data, scientific data, as well as numerical data, all and uncommon knowledge, they all get cited. So for this first week, which is what this lecture is about, so in your week 1 forum, I want you to write about what are your strengths and weaknesses in your writing. What strengths and weaknesses do you have with APA? What do you want me to talk about in my video lectures? In other words, do you want me to talk more about APA? Do you want me to talk more about credible sources? So you could look at your book, the table of contents, and then if something strikes you as mysterious or confusing, you could say, well, you know what, teacher, I didn't quite understand chapter 3. Could you go over chapter 3 of They Say, I Say? Or, well, the book says you could use first-person case, and how come you tell us we only can use third-person case? So that sort of thing. So if you have specific questions, you can put all of that into this week's forum, and also we could discuss what you want to get out of this class and what you want to learn. And so I will not ramble on any farther. I will save all the other materials that I mentioned for future lectures. And sometimes, if some of you have been in my English 101 class, you're going to notice that I will repeat some of the things that I said in English 101. I'm going to be repeating here. The only difference in English 105 is that in English 101, I went right through it, because I had so much other stuff to talk about. Whereas in English 105, I will stop and actually focus on different points regarding research. So, I want to welcome everyone to this class. My name is Professor H. I am always available. If you have questions, you can always feel free to email me. So this is one of my shorter lectures, and I just want to welcome everyone to this class. And if you have any questions, you can always email me.